Almost more news during the offseason than during in-season play at Ohio State. The Buckeyes, of course, coming off a Rose Bowl win in Pasadena over Washington. We got Steve Hellwagon on the line, Big Ten senior writer at Bucknuts. Steve, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Mark. What's going on?
Not too much. Good to see you. Let's first, the Rose Bowl is something that you've covered a number of times, but it's still a special event, a special game, a special picturesque scene. Just your thoughts and memories that you'll take from the Buckeyes' narrow win that was dominant for more than three quarters, but turned out to be a 28-23 victory.
Yeah, they got control of that game early on, and it looked like it was going to be a real blowout. And then about the middle of the third quarter, they were ahead 28-3, and they almost stopped playing on both sides of the ball. And Washington scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to make it a little bit more interesting than it probably should have been. 28-23, the final score. Ohio State recovered an onside kick in the final minute, and they sent Urban Meyer off into the sunset in a happy way. And, he was even sweating it, he said, down to the final minute. But a win in a fitting way to send him out, I guess, in his last game, at least what we believe will be his last game as a college coach. And, I think you have to give Washington a little bit of credit. I think their defense made things a little difficult for Ohio State at times. Dwayne Haskins only threw, and we say only, threw for about 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. So it was not the 300, 400-yard games from him or the 40-point type output that we'd expected or seen out of Ohio State, and yet Washington made them earn the win with the way Washington came back at the end and tried to steal it, and great credit to them. And Ohio State really sends off so many great players off of that team, the seniors, plus the guys who have now declared for the NFL draft. Dwayne Haskins, Draymond Jones had done so previously. They don't win that game without Mike Weber, 96 yards of hard, tough running, and he leaves a pretty good legacy, even though he came up just short of 1,000 yards on the season. He did outstanding. I think Ohio State played another outstanding game, 13-1, just the third team in school history to get to 13 wins. And, number 3 in the final polls, probably about what they deserve.
MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down the Buckeyes with Steve Hellwagon, senior Big Ten writer at Bucknuts, the 247 platform for Ohio State football. So you mentioned the number 3 ranking, ironically passing up Oklahoma and Notre Dame and their failed efforts in the college football playoffs. So the voters thought enough of the Buckeyes' 28-23 win over Washington, and then obviously Notre Dame's shortcomings. Oklahoma, not so much. They played a fairly decent game, at least in the second half against Alabama, but Ohio State with enough to show in the bowl game to raise them to number 3 in the country. So based on the feedback and the interactions you have with Ohio State fans, Steve, yes, the college football playoff, the national championship, that is the goal. And that's the feedback that I get from Buckeyes fans, is that they discounted the Rose Bowl, but I don't know that 13-1, Big Ten champs, Rose Bowl champions, number 3 ranked in the country, that's about as close as you can get to getting your ultimate goal.
Yeah, in the long and short of it, in the playoff, only one team ends the season with a win. Ohio State's one of the fortunate teams that went into one of the New Year's Six games and came out with a win. Texas, LSU also did the same. The fourth game is slipping my memory right now. If it was the...
Did you mention Michigan, Florida?
Yeah, Florida was the other one. So how about that? Florida, Texas, and LSU also join Ohio State as New Year's Six bowl winners. Obviously, Clemson and Alabama won their games in the semifinal to get to the championship game. And Clemson, the dominant, true national champion this year, no question about it. But Ohio State doesn't have to take a back seat really to very many. I think Clemson and Alabama have put themselves on a pedestal right now. Those are the two teams that have shared the national championship the last 4 years since Ohio State won it. Ohio State's now cycled out all the guys who were in the program when they won the national championship in 2014. And so really going forward, it's on Ryan Day to recruit at a high level, develop the players, everything that goes along with it, and put a winner on the field so that you can qualify to make the playoff in the years ahead. And a lot of the guys, the Dennis Dodds, Mark Schleybaugh, all those guys are coming out with their top 25, their top 10 for next year. Ohio State, I've seen them anywhere from third to sixth next year. And there are some question marks. Certainly, first starting with a rookie head coach. I mean, a guy, granted, who has 3 wins to his credit early in the season when Urban Meyer was serving a suspension. But you also have a rookie quarterback, a defense that probably will have either 8, 9, or 10 returning starters, but must play at a much higher level in 2019. And offense that, as it turns out, still will have some playmakers. KJ Hill coming back, deciding not to turn pro. Dobbins will be back for his 3rd year at running back. Austin Mack will return. Chris Olave, who was great at the end of the year as a true freshman, will be back. The only question, who's going to be the quarterback? Is it going to be Justin Fields? Going to be Tate Martell? I guess we'll find out starting this spring.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the Buckeyes. We've got Steve Hellwagon on the line from 247 Sports. And, of course, don't forget to like the video, comment with any questions or comments that you have, and, of course, subscribe to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Steve, little could be more expected from Urban Meyer's run at Ohio State. It's truly remarkable. But we've had a number of conversations highlighting, unfortunately, those near misses that could have just made it a ridiculous, over-the-top, dominant run, the most dominant run in college football, probably 2 to 3 wins separated Ohio State from everyone else in the country. They could have made that kind of claim. As it was a great run, winning 91% of his games. Clemson, Alabama, as you mentioned, that was just all we heard during the national championship game and prior to the national championship game. And now after that, those two programs have separated themselves. So Ohio State fans, alumni, those that work there within the athletic department, within the football operation, I got to think that rubs them a certain way, the wrong way, because it's a proud history, tradition, and program that believes it's at the very top rung.
Yeah, it was a great year, and it is obviously one of the top programs in college football. And you think about it, DeBo Sweeney after the game got on there and he said, anybody can do this. And that gives hope and inspiration to a lot of people that hopefully, will have the chance one day to hoist that trophy up and say we're the national champions as well. And I think they deserve a lot of credit for everything they've put in, everything Alabama's put in terms of the hard work, the recruiting, the player development, hiring the right coaches, developing the right systems, building the program both on and off the field to develop the players, both as athletes and as people and as students. It's a multi-layered, multifaceted thing. And yet I will disagree with Sweeney on one thing. I don't believe anybody can do that. I think that there are only probably 15 schools in the country that are investing in facilities, in coaches, in technology, in support staff, in everything else that you need. And I always say this as a joke, and I mean no harm, but Indiana ain't winning that. And, that's just the fact of the matter. And I don't mean to pick on them. It could be, you could say Wake Forest ain't winning that, or you could say, Arizona ain't winning that, or whoever. They're just not. It's the schools at the top of the rung that invest the money, the time, the people, the facilities, the money, the scholarships, and everything else across the board to make it. And it's support. It's having the state-of-the-art workout facilities. It's having all of the advantages that you could possibly build into a college football program. There's only 15 places in the country that have them. Ohio State's obviously one of them that does. We referenced earlier, Alabama and Clemson are on a plane that's right here, but I think Ohio State, Georgia, maybe LSU, a couple others are right there at that next spot. My mind kind of running, it's hard to say. USC probably has all the advantages you would need. It's just you got to recruit at such a high level to expect to compete at this top level. Ohio State's got those guys. There's no excuses. 13-1, great year. One of the best years that Ohio State didn't win a national championship in school history. Probably one of the top 10 or 11 seasons in OSU football history. And yet, the goal is to do so much more, to get in the playoff, to win the semifinals, and get into the championship game, and ultimately to win the championship. So there's more levels and layers out there for Ryan Day to aspire to. He understands it completely. He knows all about it. He knows where he's at. And in a lot of ways, he's a Chip Kelly disciple. Chip Kelly trying to rebuild UCLA. Ryan Day, in some regards, is going to start this job out on third base with all the built-in advantages that he has at Ohio State, the great recruiting that Urban Meyer did, and everything else. And we're going to see, given the keys to this castle, this kingdom, what Ryan Day is going to come back with. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, even take a place like Iowa, Nebraska, despite as much as they put into football, their proud traditions, how many NFL players they produce, that they've got two of the top coaches in the country at those two institutions, just based on where they're located. It's extremely difficult for them to win at that level. Maybe Nebraska, because of the tradition and reaching into Texas and California, could pull it off, but that's a difficult task even for schools that have ascended to that level, and we see routinely in the top 25, not Nebraska in recent years, but you know where I'm headed with that. Got Steve Hellwagon on the line from 247 Sports. Join him there at Bucknuts for the best in Ohio State football coverage. It's fascinating to consider, and we could go through the accolades for Urban Meyer, that his worst season at Ohio State was actually a playoff season. If you take his worst record at Ohio State, it was 11-2, and they actually made the playoffs that year.
Yeah, kind of crazy. Lost that season to Penn State mid-season, and Penn State won the Big Ten championship, but Penn State was not selected. They had 2 losses. Ohio State had 1, and Ohio State got selected to play in the playoffs. So, the politics of the playoff, I think, very interesting. That you can have a great team and not make it. Ohio State had a better team in 2015 with Bosa and Elliott than they did in 2016 without those guys, and they didn't make it. So just 1 loss in 2015 as well. 1 loss in 2013 in the Big Ten championship game and didn't make it. So, it is just kind of the rub of the green. I think in each year, you never know what the scenario is going to be. You could write 5 different scenarios for the 5 different years of this playoff. And I think by and large, when we talked, back in early December, I probably agreed with the committee that it wasn't Ohio State. And I even made the joke that one of my best friends said the committee, they didn't say it, but they could just say, well, we watched their games of this season. They're not one of the top 4 teams. But, ultimately it is what it is. Tough decisions have to be made. I think the best thing you can do is win the games that you should win and look good. Obviously, there's some eye test involved with this. In Ohio State, that's going to come back in their favor one of these years. I don't look at it that there's some systemic bias against Ohio State. I think what happened with Notre Dame is going to be potentially held against them for the next year or 2 until they prove that we truly do have one of the top 3 or 4 teams in a given year. So at any rate, again, it's kind of the vagaries of each season define themselves. All the clamor that we had, I'm very active on Twitter, and we all give our 2 cents on 8-team this, and we should do it this way, and home sites and all this other stuff. And I think everybody's got the best interest of college football in mind, but until they find a partner that is willing to write the check to televise 4 more quarterfinal games, until they get bids on that, it's kind of premature to say, yeah, that'd be when we start hearing that they've formed a feasibility committee to feel out Fox and ESPN or whoever, CBS, to see if there should be another. I would assume ESPN would have the first right of refusal built into the contract that they already have with the committee and with college football. Until we hear that those talks have kind of began informal to price it out, it's not going anywhere. And the commissioners came back this year and said that it's really not as close to 8 teams just yet as you all may think it should be or will be. So I think we're stuck with 4 is kind of the idea I get, until somebody really gets riffed on this thing in the next year or two, and then maybe it'll get revisited again. But I think 4 is where it's at, and I don't really have a big problem with it. And I'm interested to see again, what can I predict Ohio State will be in that 4 this coming year? I look at their schedule, game at Nebraska, a team that's on the rise. Could that be their Iowa or Purdue this year? And then, of course, at Michigan at the end of the year. Michigan's going to rise up and beat Ohio State one of these years, whether it's next year, the year after that. At some time in the next 5 or 10 years, it's going to happen. I can't tell you when, but it wouldn't surprise or shock me if things kind of go sideways for Ohio State next year. They have some injuries to key people or whatever. Perhaps that's when it is. But there are some people in their top 10s that have Michigan ahead of Ohio State, which is kind of crazy. But again, we'll get into it in 2019 and see what it looks like. But again, I think this is a year that Ohio State fans can be proud of their team. They overcame a lot to be 13-1. Dysfunctional beginning to the season with Urban Meyer not being there. Dysfunctional defense all season. Great offense, best offense probably in school history, and certainly a career year for Ohio State. The quarterback position, Big Ten, the best year any quarterback's ever had with Dwayne Haskins. So I think enjoy the memories and kind of revel in the fact that they survived all that adversity and really had a great year.
5 years of the playoff, it intrigues me that Ohio State's been on the fence every year. Number 4, number 5, number 4, number 5, number 6, although 12-1 and a conference champion, they were obviously that close to making it.
They were 5A this year, 5B, because that didn't hold any water for me, Mark. Sure. I said that week is like, and somebody on our message board said, okay, you've got 2 losses, Georgia, to the best 2 teams you played. Maybe you're not one of the top 4 teams in the country. If you've lost, 2 games to Alabama and whatever it was, maybe you're not up there, but whatever.
Steve Hellwagon on the line from 247 Sports talking Ohio State football, and 2 subjects I'd like to hit on. Steve, I know you don't have too much time, but Dwayne Haskins out and Justin Fields in.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about Justin Fields. I know the Columbus Dispatch and the Toledo Blade talked to his attorney, who also represented Shea Patterson last year, and was able to get Shea immediate eligibility at Michigan. That happened at the last part of April. He thinks this will be an open and shut case determined sometime in February, with Georgia basically signing off on this, that Justin Fields will have immediate eligibility as a sophomore at Ohio State. So then what we'll have in the spring is a competition, a 3-way competition, honestly, with Justin Fields, Tate Martell, who's been the backup this past year, and then Matthew Baldwin, a freshman who redshirted this past year. The 3 of them will probably get close to even reps. Martell has the built-in advantage, 2 years in the system with Ryan Day, but Justin Fields, one of the very top prospects in the country a year ago, going to Georgia, and a tremendous run pass specialist. And I guess they will hash it out one way or the other. Obviously, you're bringing in a new quarterbacks coach, Mike Yurcich from Oklahoma State, did a great job there with Mason Rudolph, who put up well over 10,000 yards in his time as the quarterback there. The quarterback this year, his name slips my memory, but again, they put up huge numbers at Oklahoma State again this year. And Yurcich being brought in, he had picked by Ryan Day to take over co-offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach. And it'll be interesting to see what new direction, the Ohio State offense takes. Are they going to retain a lot of what everyone said was the Ohio State Urban Meyer offense? Will this be the Ryan Day, Mike Yurcich offense? I'm interested to see what direction it goes.
And you've taken us down the direction of the coaching upheaval on the defensive staff in particular, with Greg Schiano out. And then you get Greg Madison in along with Jeff Hafley. If you can kind of run down to some of these recent moves, new linebackers coach, a number of new coaches along the both sides of the ball.
Yeah, the only defensive assistant that seems like he's going to be retained is the defensive line coach, Larry Johnson, who we've talked about ad infinitum for weeks, months. Just great job. The Bosa's, Tremont Jones, everybody he has coached has turned out to be a great player. And the defensive line was not the sticking point with the defense this year. Greg Schiano, the defensive coordinator, Bill Davis, the linebackers coach, Alex Grinch, who was the safeties coach and the co-defensive coordinator. He has gone on to Oklahoma. The other two, Davis and Schiano, obviously both have NFL experience and want to get back to the NFL. I think that's the polite way of saying they're not coming back to Ohio State this next year and going to pursue NFL opportunities. Taylor Johnson was in his second stint at Ohio State, and he was the cornerbacks coach. He's kind of hanging in the wind right now. Either be him coming back, or as we're hearing it, Ryan Day will go to the convention this week down in San Antonio, interview a few people, and bring back a new assistant coach to help either on defense or special teams alone. I guess we're kind of up in the air on that. But he's bringing in three guys with great track record. Jeff Hafley will be there as the defensive coordinator, coming from the San Francisco 49ers. He and Day worked together there. Greg Madison, a veteran coach, nearly 70 years old, from the University of Michigan. He'd been in Michigan, had coached there for three different head coaches, and has done a great job up there. You think about all the great defensive linemen that Michigan has produced on his watch, Rashawn Gary this year. And then they went back to Michigan again. Al Washington, the linebackers coach, Columbus native, and he's coming home to Columbus. He and Day worked together at Boston College. Madison and Day worked together at Florida. So there is familiarity with all three of those guys. Al Washington, a younger guy, going to be a great recruiter for Ohio State. His emphasis has been on linebackers. Hafley has been in the secondary. Madison probably be a floater, help defensive line and linebackers as well. And remains to be seen whether they will add a fifth coach on that defensive side or a special teams coach again. But what we're finding here is that Ryan Day is now the head coach. This is his program. He's going to hire his people. He's not keeping Urban Meyer's people out of loyalty or out of duty or anything else. He looked at that defense, saw it was very much dysfunctional this past year. Again, Grinch was kind of an up-and-comer, and he was the first one that, he got a great opportunity to go to Oklahoma and call the defense for Lincoln Riley, so that made sense. You thought, well, Schiano helped Day at the beginning of the year reach that transition with the defense and being the head coach, and yet that wasn't enough for him to retain him either. So the linebacker play was substandard. So they're going a new direction with guys. Al Washington, he had Bush from Michigan, who was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. Both he and Madison have coached outstanding all Big Ten, All-American players over their time. And I think that that's the direction that Day wants to go in. He wants to have a new set of eyes. The defense at Ohio State will be much better, not just because of these coaches. They're going to have 8, 9, or 10 returning starters. Waiting to find out about Damon Arnett and Kendall Sheffield, the 2 corners. But even if they go, Jeffrey Okudah and Sean Wade are ready to step in. Jordan Fuller is already coming back. Basically everybody but Draymond Jones should be back. And a year older, smarter, wiser, faster, stronger, they're going to be better, particularly with new set of eyes. Calling the scheme, putting the guys in the right position. And I think that it is going to be the defense could actually get back to being a catalyst for this program beginning in 2019.
Yeah, Sheffield seemed to struggle early in his career, but finished strong down the stretch. Had a nice season.
I thought he actually had a pretty good year in 2018. Arnett, to me, just seemed there were either yellow flags or big plays in his wake, seemed too often this year. And so athletically, he's going to go to the combine and be, up here among guys who test out speed-wise, agility, et cetera. It's just making plays on the football, getting stops. I mean, too many times they got a fresh set of downs or a touchdown, and one or the other of those guys, probably less Sheffield, more Arnett, were at fault. But within their rights, certainly 3 years in, they have the right to make that move.
Yeah, I thought Sheffield and Okudah had strong Rose Bowl performances as well. So the Maize and Blue famously stealing Ohio players back in the 80s and 90s, bringing them to Ann Arbor. But here in 2018, the Buckeyes dipping into the University of Michigan pool of coaches to grab a few for here in Columbus this fall. Steve Hellwagon from 247 Sports. You got to join him right there for the best in Ohio State football coverage at bucknuts.com. Mark Rogers TV, of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel for college football nonstop. Steve, we always appreciate the time.
All right, Mark, take care.